welcome. I would like to call Mr. Costa, Antonio Costa, leader of PS Portugal, future Prime Minister of Portugal. Thank you, Antonio. Catiuscia Marini, the new President of the Committee of Region, PS Group. Congratulations for your newly election. Thanks for being here. Maria João Rodrigues, Vice President of the S&D Group. Thank you, Maria. István Ülei, our host from Hungary, MEP, Head of the Hungarian delegation. Jan Erik Stöstad, newly elected Secretary General of SAMAK. Thanks for being here from the trade union. We are very glad that you are here. And Laura Slimani, also freshly elected President of YES. Thank you very much, Laura. Take your seats. So, thanks again for everybody for being here. It's the second debate. The debate will be about jobs, about the economy. We know that since 2008, Europe has been in a very difficult situation with high-level unemployment. So, our objective in this meeting, in this debate, it's how do we create quality jobs, of course. How do we create a fair economy and equal societies? How do we give back hope to European citizens? We know that this is the fundamental issues that we have to answer now. This is our challenge as European Social Democrats. And I would like immediately to start with Mr. Costa Antonio. My first question to you, en français. J'inviterai tout le monde à mettre son casque pour la traduction. Monsieur Costa Antonio va s'exprimer en français. Et donc, par rapport justement à cette
Mr. Costa is going to take the floor in French.
Au niveau socio-économique.
As far as the economic crisis is concerned, you as leaders in Portugal, future Prime Minister, what would be your priorities, reform priorities in Europe, for Portugal and for Europe? You have the floor on this, on the failure of the conservative agenda. Antonio, you have the floor. Yes, good morning. Thank you very much for this invitation to this conversation on unemployment. I think we can start, to start our reflection, we should take a look at the figures in Eurostat on the regions where there's the highest level of unemployment, and those regions where there is a lower rate of unemployment. At the lowest level of unemployment, we find regions in Germany, one in Austria, and one region in the Czech Republic. In the 10 regions with the highest level of unemployment, there are 7 regions in Spain and 3 regions in Greece. So unemployment is an overall issue, but regional intensity is different as far as unemployment is concerned. Why? Because there is this very clear link between the effects, the asymmetric effects of the euro on the European market and the issue of unemployment. Everybody knows that the monetary union does not reinforce economic convergence. This is why in 1992, when Jacques Delors launched the single market, he also created the cohesion policy. More competitiveness, but more cohesion at the same time, which means more convergence. And it worked quite well until the beginning of this century. At the beginning of this century, we suffered 3 very strong shocks in terms of competitiveness: globalization, the enlargement, and the creation of the euro. But unlike what was done in '92, we did not reinforce reinforce the cohesion side, because maybe at that time we thought that lower interest rates would be enough to allow member states or companies or families to cope with this difference in competitiveness and by using debt. As we know now, This was the wrong incentive. The very high level of indebtedness, public debt and private debt, both of them, is mainly the result of these wrong incentives. What should be the lessons we should draw from the crisis in the Eurozone? Now, it's not possible, if we see it's not possible to stabilize the euro without convergence. And convergence cannot be financed by debt. This is why in the Eurozone we need to do what was done in the other monetary unions. In the United States, as we know, starting in the 19th century, after the monetary unification of the United States, what did they do? They also unified and strengthened budget solidarity. And budget solidarity has two sides. On the one side, a common discipline. No country, no state can go beyond a certain level, a certain cap of deficit. Otherwise, all the others pay for the lack of budgetary discipline of that state. But there needs to be a second side, and that's solidarity, budget solidarity. And budgetary solidarity needs to have two dimensions. One, which is already on the table, is how to share the absorption of the asymmetric effects of a crisis. For instance, how can we pool in a European pool, for instance, an unemployment insurance? But much more important than in pooling the risks is to prevent risks. And this is why the document that the Portuguese and Spanish socialists presented to the Party of European Socialists, which, by the way, was approved last week. For the presidents, this is a very important document. The document is called A New Impulse for Convergence. What does it mean? It means that after these 30 years of Portugal and Spain participating in the European Union, what we need is a new momentum, a new effort, a relaunch of the cohesion policy, focused on issues which are crucial in each country to strengthen the capacity to achieve convergence. In our case, it's education, it's the modernization of our states, of the judiciary system more particularly, innovation in small and medium-sized companies, capitalization of companies. These are crucial issues for a economic upturn and for employment. The big lesson that we need to draw from this crisis is that sustainable stability of the euro needs real convergence on the economic side. And to achieve real economic convergence, it is not enough. Debt is not enough. And the so-called structural reforms cannot be considered an ideological charter of the right, but needs to be flanked by progressive reforms to create employment, to create jobs and quality jobs. I think that's the crucial issue for the future of the Eurozone. Thank you. Thank you, Antonio. Exactly as you said, the presidency unanimously supported your program that you presented with PSOE, and we wish you a lot of success in implementing this reform program. Some points were also taken up in the general resolution adopted by the Congress.
Marini, our newly elected chair of the group in the Committee of Region. It has been mentioned that in several regions, in several countries, but also in several regions, like in Greece, in Spain, in Portugal, we have high level of unemployment, and that the question of new poor, working poor is very important. So as chair of our group in the Committee of Region, what do you think should be the role of local authorities to give new impulse for job creation at regional level.
Sì, grazie.
Thank you. Also in the name of the Socialist Group of the Committee of Region, my reflections on the topic of unemployment, replying also on your previous comment, the cities and regions in these years have suffered the direct impacts and the social effects of the crisis. And crisis has brought about a loss of competitivity of enterprises, of companies, and it created profound effects in local communities in which there aren't always present pools and resources for local and regional policies. So we have an opportunity that we have to grab in a smart way. In the program of 2014-2020, which is the management of local bodies, of these instruments, which will be also united instruments of local and regional character. These have to consent positive environment in order to regain competitivity. This is needed also for the creation of new workplaces and to give assistance for those people who have lost their workplaces, but also, in particular, those generations of young people who have lost all that chance to get a workplace, especially in those cities and regions that have been impacted by the crisis. So we want a more innovative program in order to move new technologies. We want digital environment, but also we want to work on human resources. Local and regional bodies have influence on education, local education, integration of professional schools, vocational schools, in order to capitalize on human resources and to create new possibilities to create workplaces. On the other hand, I'd like to state that we have to give a role also to the progressive European socialists to envision new policies that don't work only from upward, from upside towards down, but also grassroots initiatives. The Juncker plan, instead of thinking about moving from up towards down, has attempted to take all the initiatives, grassroots initiatives and local initiatives, which are dynamic environments that we might use for successful investments, which is a new possibility, a new chance for investments, which is able to fire up new dynamism, which today we don't have, and which might create new types of cooperation between cities, among cities and regions. I'd like to congratulate on the work of the Commission, because they have represented the only instrument for political measures to further occupation, to further our cause. So our legislation that we have on in the single countries, in the local level, it can contribute with local strength in order to further growth. European policies this way might be more efficient to grab the opportunities offered by local initiatives. In this moment, investments are frozen and should become useful in order to create new workplaces, especially for the youth and for women.
Thank you very much, Katyusha, and I would like also to congratulate you and the PD for the good result that you had in the regional election recently, with 5 out of 7 regions. So very often we are strong at regional level, also in France, in Germany, and we understand, as being close to citizens, how we can bring this extra push for policies that are really in their interest, with good education, also promoting investment and working for a better convergence. There is already many issues that have been raised in the beginning of this debate. I would like to give the floor now to Maria again on these issues of how to create better social convergence in Europe. We are afraid, citizens are afraid that we will go, competition, social dumping, downwards standards. So what would be, with the S&D group, I know that you are working very hard on that, an agenda for better cohesion in Europe. Maria João.
Yannick, many thanks for this question. Look, I would like to underline that today socialists and social democrats, they are confronted with a new problem in Europe. Because in the past, we were dealing with sometimes very high unemployment due to pressures coming from globalization or competition. But now there is something new. The leader of the Portuguese Socialist Party really underlined, is that we have big divergences never seen inside Europe, because we can have regions with 5% of unemployment rate and other regions close to 50%. So Europe was never like that. So this is really a new problem. But then, because of this unemployment very high, we have sometimes forced emigration, brain drain in some regions, and in other regions, social dumping, pressure on the basic social standards. And all these things are now there, and in fact, I believe they are the two faces of the same coin. High unemployment on one side, and the pressure on social standards on the other side. So we need to have a combined plan to deal with this problem. I will bring some ideas about this plan, but let me just underline how could we get there, because this is really a new problem. And very shortly, in a snapshot, I would say, in 2000, we were in the majority of the European Council. And it was possible to adopt a progressive agenda for growth, competitiveness, and jobs. But then, by 2005, we lost this majority. And we were, in fact, defeated by conservatives and neoliberals, which, when the financial crisis came, they used explicitly the financial crisis to put pressure on our welfare systems, on our labor markets, with neoliberal reforms of the labor markets, and destroying a lot of jobs. This was even magnified by the Eurozone crisis, because the Eurozone started operating as a big machine for divergence. Financial divergence, economic divergence, social and political. So this is undermining the political support for European integration. This is the situation, and this is completely new for us. That's why I agree with the leader of the Socialist Party when he says that the only solution for this is to have a real plan to go to the root of the problem. And so that's why I'm bringing some ideas. First, of course, we need a commitment with good social standards, and we need to update this list of social standards with access to social protection, healthcare, lifelong learning, attacking child poverty. These are examples where we need to update. Then, second point, a strong commitment with social investment to reconcile family life with working life, the childcare structures. To go to the problem of child poverty, we cannot accept to have child poverty in such a rich continent as we are in Europe. We should also deal with the problem of course, youth unemployment. And we have done something, but we need to go further with youth guarantee. And then let's not forget about the long-term unemployment. But I really think that if we want to go to the root of the problem, we need to have a much larger initiative investment. Well, we could, by a combined effort in our family, governments, European Parliament, national parliamentarians, Committee of Regions, we could come up now with a European investment plan. This is an important first step, but let me tell you, I think this will not be enough, because the gap, the investment gap we have, the unemployment rate we have is so high that we need to go deeper to the problem, and to go deeper is to complement national budgets with something new to enable them to invest more, because they cannot invest. They are, of course, supposed to comply with the common fiscal discipline in the Eurozone. And that's why I think the solution for this, for us, is to build a new Eurozone fiscal capacity. I think this is the time is there for us in our family to discuss this seriously. Because if we are not able to build up this fiscal capacity, unemployment remains very high in some regions, and the pressure on social standards in other regions will go on. So this is, in a nutshell, the outcome of a clear position already adopted by our group, but the PES is also very active about that. And that's it.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Maria Jo. This new Eurozone fiscal capacity is really the big issue now for us in the Parliament, but also with our governments and our parties, and we will continue to well, foster the discussion and make it real in the coming period. I would like to give the floor now to István. István, you are the chair of the MSZP delegation, the Hungarian delegation in the European Parliament in the SND group. You are also one of the young MEP, or youngest MEP from a group, less than 40. I know that you have been very active on the question of youth employment. You had an initiative, so I would like you to present what you have done to tackle the question of youth unemployment that is really a dramatic issue now in Europe.
Thank you, Janek. If you don't mind, I would like to use my mother language, because I'm at home and it's very comfortable for me to speak in Hungarian, so please use your headsets. Kedves barátaim, kedves elvtársak!
So, dear comrades and the European Democrat and Hungarian Social Democrat, I welcome you here in Budapest and in Hungary, which is an exciting country with a lot of culture, and you have to know and understand that while we have a fantastic history, but in the recent years this had a society that actually had a faster speed of poverty. Poverty has reached a level in the recent period that has never seen before by the Hungarian society. So for this very reason, the Hungarian Socialist Party and the representatives, whether we are in Hungary or in the European Parliament, the most important issue is how we can actually tackle this social crisis and how we can create opportunities and jobs for each and every age group, especially for the young. in the previous panel discussion with you, they talked about our common European values and democracy, and I heard very wise ideas and thoughts about the European democratic system. But my question is the following. Are we receptible in the European societies to maintain the democratic values? The societies who actually had to weather through huge crises in the other financial crisis, do they feel the importance of democracy? Because what I experienced, not only in Hungary but also in other areas, that it is natural that people actually turn inside and they deal with their own problem, and because of this, the weight of the common European values actually is much lower for them. Can we talk about European stability when we have such a high rate of youth unemployment? Is it possible to build up the future if in Europe we have more than 5.5 million people who actually didn't reach age of 25 years of age, and in some of the member states, the population is less than 5.5 million. So for these people, the European institution and their own government, could they actually give a right explanation what is at stake? And is there any correlation between European radicalism, between the support of extreme rights and the populist parties' power and the strength and the disappointment of these youngsters in the European democratic values? I think there is a correlation. So for us, the left supporters, we have to manage these problems for two reasons. One of the reasons is that we must give an opportunity for all people who are under 25 to be able to find a job, because we will not be able to have a competitive and safe Europe and societies in Europe. But and second reason, that if we are worried for the European values and democracy, also here in Hungary, then we should take a look at the figures that in this age group of 30 years of age, this is where actually the populist parties' support has increased at the highest rate. So we have to activate and move this age group. So for this reason, the S&D's 40 minus age group, we created a policy paper. It's a common manifesto which has to be moved forward, but actually it demands specific actions from us, because we have to actually face ourselves, that we have to find the problems in ourselves, both in the national governments and also in the European institutions. I'm proud of being a European socialist, and who has been delegated by the Youth Socialist Party, and also Laszlo Andor. I'm proud of Laszlo Andor, who is a commissioner, and also Hungarian left supported this youth guarantee that actually can be a way out of the crisis of the youth. But I have to ask the question, what has happened since then? This has been put down on the table for many years. The budget is available for this, and also the national governments, like the Hungarian government, didn't even want to raise this issue and discuss this issue. Because it says that in 4 months there should be a retraining, or by EU resources, a 4-month period is available to find a job. And the Hungarian government didn't even enact this. And I think there are problems in other countries. So our initiative is for the SMD 40s age group, that we should bring up some resolutions, and the European socialists should actually come up with this resolutions that will actually eliminate this youth unemployment. And there's one last sentence. This is a very hot topic in Hungary. 5 years ago, 60,000 youngsters actually left Hungary to find jobs in, for instance, in London and Berlin and in any other countries. But in the last 5 years, this actually increased to 600,000. Can you imagine what it means for the Hungarian society, what impact it has? So we have to start dealing with this issue, because it's not a problem only for London, but we will have no more nurses, we will have no fitting and turning people to fix our gas pipeline system, because everybody wants to work rather in Berlin and London, and this will kill the European project. So if we would like to have a long-term European development, this is where the grassroots of the problem is, and this is where we need the support of the SMD 40 age group.
To give some hope, but really perspective also in your home countries for the youth. Otherwise, it's giving support for rising extremism. I would like to jump directly to Laura, if you allow me, because we're talking about youth unemployment, and together with YES, we have been working a lot on the youth guarantee. So, Laura, I would give you the floor, because the fight is not over. We know that there is a lot of things to do, both at national level, where it's not well implemented. In some countries it is where we are, mainly, but there are some issues to do, but also at the EU level. So Laura, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you everyone, and thank you for being in the room and for listening to this important topic that is jobs. At every of our event, I think we have something about jobs. I think every of our event actually is called something jobs. This time is United for Jobs. The reality we know in Europe is not great, and I'm not going to come here and tell you that we're doing an excellent job. Obviously, we're not in the majority in the European Parliament, but in many of our countries we have governments and we're not reaching the results that we would like to regarding youth unemployment. So yes, we made a great achievement, and it was an achievement from YES, from PES, from the S&D group regarding the youth guarantee. It's now being implemented in many countries, and basically it says that every young person who is unemployed needs to be offered an opportunity very quickly so that they can get back on track, either with a job or with a training. But, there's a but. How many young unemployed people in Europe? 5 million, over 5 million. How much budget is in the youth guarantee for 6 years? It's 6 billion over 6 years. So basically, I calculated last night, it's 200 euros per young unemployed in Europe. Every year. It's nothing. I mean, it's 200 euros, but the question is, how do we manage to implement this? Well, we need more money for the youth guarantee. Member states need more money for the youth guarantee. So either we raise and we create a common budget, common fiscal capacities for the European Union, or we put an end to austerity policies at the moment that prevent member states from investing in the future, because it prevents member states from investing, of course, in the youth guarantee, but also in health, also in education, also in the energetic transition, which are the areas where we will actually create or be able to create jobs in the future. And the second thing that was also raised, earlier is that it's not the same thing to implement the youth guarantee when you're in a country like Austria, where you have less than 10% youth unemployment, rather than when you're in a country like Portugal or Spain, where you have about 50% youth unemployment. It's not the same, because it's not the same budget. So the reality is that we need solidarity. We need solidarity between member states. And that means increasing fiscal capacities. That means a common corporate tax. And that means also having the very famous, but still not alive, financial transaction tax finally implemented. But, dear comrades, I would be lying to you if I told you that the youth guarantee was the solution, the solution for youth unemployment. Because we always talk about youth unemployment, but really what we have to realize is that young people are not unemployed because they're young. They're not unemployed because they're less qualified or because they're less competitive, less productive. I mean, they're the most competitive, most qualified, most productive generation we've ever known in Europe. The reason why they're unemployed is because the employment market, the job market, is in such a terrible state. And so I think that the main problems of unemployment in Europe are two. The first one is that instead of having solidarity policies, most states at the moment are trying to create jobs by lowering labor costs and by basically dumping socially, dumping fiscally, by gaining a little bit of competitiveness towards one another. The problem is that the ones that are losing out from this are the workers themselves, because they're losing out social protection, they're losing out wages, and we're not creating massively jobs. We're creating jobs in some countries that are really precarious, like the zero-hour contract jobs in the United Kingdom. Now, are these the jobs that we want to create, or do we want another kind of jobs? And the second main problem that I think we have to address as socialists in the 21st century is that every year, with the increase of productivity, with the massive increase of robotization, we're destroying more jobs than we are creating every year. And so that means we have two options today. The first one is business as usual. Business as usual is that we keep lowering labor costs here and there in countries generally and gradually, and it's basically a race to the bottom. In this, we also adopt the TTIP in hoping that maybe it will create jobs, although the only studies that were done on this were done by the European Commission and that said that maybe it will create jobs, but these studies are also contested by many progressive economists at the moment, in the sense that we don't know actually if it will create jobs. What we know is that it might challenge jobs at the local level, especially in the energetic sector. Second solution, which I would prefer, of course, and which the young European socialists would prefer, is to dare thinking differently, to dare thinking out of the box, to dare changing paradigm, and the paradigm that we're being imprisoned in at the moment. We live on the richest continent, on the richest area of the planet. On this richest area of the planet, 25 million people are unemployed. On the richest area of the planet, 80 million people live below the poverty line. In the next years, millions of jobs will be destroyed by the increase of productivity and by the increase of robotization. So the constant increase in production is also a huge problem at the moment regarding the planet and the capacity that we will have to keep having mankind on the planet. So if we look at the situation, and we do the most logical thing to do, not even being ideological, just being very pragmatic. We unite our economic zones socially and fiscally to put an end to the social and fiscal dumping. This is step one. Step two is that we refuse TTIP, which risks to put European workers in an ever wider competition and dumping area. And number three is that because this period of time is one of immense concentration of wealth, because it's possible to do it if we agree on high common social and fiscal standards, and because we need less working hours today to create more wealth than we ever have, well, we need to reconsider reducing working time collectively at the European level. And I know this is not consensual among ourselves. I know this is not consensual among ourselves, and I'm finishing here. We're not here to be consensual. We're here this weekend to find the path to socialism in Europe, and I'm telling you, socialism is not about deficits, socialism is not about interest rates, socialism is not about being competitive with China or America, socialism is about being fair, is about doing what is just, about sharing, and about making the world a better place for our generation, and we believe it is the way. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura, for your fresh proposal. We are very glad that Jan-Erik Sjöstedt is with us. As socialists, we have a very good relationship with trade unions, so we are glad to have here the new Secretary General from the SAMAK, but with trade unionist background. So we know that liberals, conservatives have really used the crisis to undermine the European social model. So together, we and you, trade union, what should be our answer? The floor is yours, and I have to say the time is running, so the floor is yours.
I'll try to be brief. It's great to be here on behalf of SAMAK. SAMAK is the Nordic Social Democrats and Trade Unions Committee, Cooperation Committee. But you have got a tough question for me, and I think it's most helpful if I take a Nordic perspective and a sort of bird's view perspective. And of course, we fight continuously to develop our Nordic model. And on the whole, we have been successful also the last 10 and 20 years, we think, especially when you think of the financial crisis. So it's, in a way, the Nordic model is alive and kicking. So this continued success has forced the conservatives and the liberals in the Nordic countries to move their rhetorics towards the middle. So they now embrace the Nordic model. And in this way, they have won elections. Think of Fredrik Reinfeldt in Sweden, Fogh Rasmussen in Denmark. But their policies have remained the same. So what we had to do, we had to clarify what the real Nordic model is about to our voters and perhaps to ourselves, because it had become somewhat blurred. And especially, we have had to clarify that a decent, well-organized labor market is an essential pillar of the Nordic model. So, a well-organized labor market is not only good for the workers and the workplace, but it's fundamental to an equal society in the Nordic countries. That means that in the Nordic model, responsible, forward-looking, and strong trade unions are necessary to achieve the goals: equality, gender equality, efficiency, growth, and so on. And how? Yes, the trade union lifts the low wages, which then press the private sector to be even more productive, and then press the politicians to prioritize education, 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 and an active labor market policy. So this is a virtuous circle, which we'll come into. Now, of course, such a virtuous circle can turn into a vicious one. So now it is important to safeguard the main pillars, and especially the organized labor market, which is threatened both by political forces and by social dumping in Norway and other Nordic countries. So our lesson has been to go back to the Nordic model fundamentals, since we have met new political and economic challenges. So we undertook a major research project on the essence and the future of the Nordic model. And SAMAK has also adopted a political manifesto called the Södermarka Declaration, which is a sort of roadmap for the future social democracy and trade unions in the Nordics. 30 pages, red document, nice reading. So our lesson then is that if you want to have the fundamentals right, or if you want to change them, you have to look thoroughly just at the fundamentals, and especially the labor market, which I think is at heart of the social model in the Nordic countries and in Europe. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Jan Erik, and we will be very glad to distribute, of course, the document to our members. Now we are arriving to the end of this discussion. I would like to thank you all for your input, but you have each of you 1 minute, but not more than 1 minute, please, for the priority that you would like us to underline back in your movement, in your organization, together with us, member parties, group, the youth, the Committee of Regions. So I will start with you, Katyusha. In 1 minute, what would be the priority that we have to develop now?
The priority for the authorities, and to increase the investments and the investments for the local authorities. This is the major problems, and the major problem was the austerity and the capacity of investments to increase the investments, the private investments. Today is in the European region, it was widening the gap between the regions. There are a lot of regions, 210 out of 270, where this occupation has doubled. That calls, we have to put in movement to the initiatives, to the regions, and make a treasure from the ideas and the proposals in the cities and the regions, in the directions to prove a convergency, even with the cohesion politics and integrations, with the measures, European measures, national and the regionals, sometimes we have the sensation that the Juncker plan, some just are always the same. Or instead, we have to move and boost and the qualification of the investment, and it would be a very good. We had a proposal, a white book on the public spending on the European Union, because not on the expense of the public spending is making the same possibilities to increase the possibilities of the work. So first of all, investments.
I would give now the floor to István. 1 minute for you, or priorities.
Thank you, Yonek, once again. And in 1 minute, I don't think we can discuss this issue. I just would like to indicate that the European left cannot just go by without a word the initiative which was read by us recently as a German-French initiative. The initiative of Zsigmond can change the future of Europe fundamentally, and can also change the future of Hungary, which is a new member state, if after 10 years of accession we can call Hungary a new member state. We have to talk about it in PES and at all the other fora. We would like to give an impetus or another impetus to integration, that's one option, or divide Europe into two parts. Probably I am the last speaker from the leaders of the MSP, the Hungarian Socialist Party. So first of all, thank you very much for choosing Budapest and Hungary as the venue for this Congress, because it gives a strong indication to the fact that you consider us part of Europe, and this way you help us to show Orbán the other face of Hungary, and which is far from being illiberal. And thank you very much, Yonek, and all the organizers for this Congress. Thank you.
Thank you, István. Of course, we are very glad to be here and to support you in your struggle. I would give the floor to Laura. Laura, 1 minute, Young European Socialist Priority.
I'm going to be very, very short. At a time where you have young people who are forced to leave their country to find a job in another one, at the time where some others are suffering terrible health conditions because of austerity policies, I would say that the priority for my generation, if we want to prevent us from being a lost generation, if we want to give us a future, is to stop the austerity policies in Europe. And at this moment, I would like also that as the Party of European Socialists, I think it is also our duty to support the Greek government at the moment who is fighting austerity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Laura. And it was not planned, but you give me my transition, because my final word was on Maria João, especially on Greece. So what do we have to do in this very important moment for Greece, as we are all fighting against the Grexit, and that we want to express our solidarity and to support Greece? Maria João.
Okay. So I will say something about Greece, because we do need to say, but let me just say that if there is a priority for us, is really to reconnect with young people. So I'm sure that Laura and the young socialists will help us to work in this direction, because this is the central task for the future of Europe. But now in Greece, also the young people in Greece are suffering a lot. And we need absolutely to avoid a new Greek tragedy. We should respect the democratic will of the Greek population. Democracy needs to be respected by the European Union. But second, we need a real alternative. The recipe of the past was just a disaster. It has destroyed many viable companies, many viable jobs in Greece. This is a complete disaster. But Syriza claims are not responsible claims. So that's why our family since the beginning, since we had elections in Greece, has adopted a position saying we need an alternative for Greece. The top priority should be to relaunch investment, jobs creation, a real economic and social recovery in Greece. Then we need to give Greece some more room to invest, and this means to have a fiscal surplus which is smaller for Greece to have this breathing space they need. And the third point is something about reforms, because we don't refuse the discussion about reforms. But our approach is completely different. It's nonsense to say that the top priority reform for Greece is a traditional labor market reform. No, what we really need is an effective state in Greece, an effective public administration with a good tax collection system, ensure that the tax burden will be spread in a fair way, and then we also need to have good conditions for small and medium enterprises to invest. So these are the kind of progressive reforms we are pushing for. So the final call is, this is a big test for the European Union because euro is a political project. If there is no solution over the next days, this will be a major failure, not only for the Eurozone, but for the European Union. But Social Democrats are in key places, so let's see what we can do together.
Thank you, Maria Joao. We will do that, of course, up to the next council on the 25th. Jan-Erik, as a trade unionist from SAMAK, your priority.
Well, I would like to reiterate the point made earlier that the problems of unemployment and social dumping are very interconnected. They are sort of twin problems, and we have to solve them both. My final thing to say today is that listen to Stefan Löfven when it comes to Brussels to get a decent European labor market. Please. Thank you.
Thank you. And the final speaker then would be Antonio. Antonio, ta priorité en tant que...
Antonio, your priority as a future Prime Minister of Portugal. Now, the priority is to the smartest use of financial resources for the Europe of 2020 and to create jobs. One example, funds for productivity of companies, and if there are funds for the youth guarantee, then we need an active employment policy focused on young people, for jobs for young people in companies, because higher skilled young people are factors for modernization and innovation in companies. If there are European funds to cope with climate change and to make it possible to make investments to improve energy efficiency, then that's a good start to start reinvesting in the building sector, which was very harshly hit in the crisis, and to create jobs for the older generation, less skilled workers, who are confronted with long-term unemployment. So our priority is to use existing resources more intelligently with clear priorities, create jobs and fight unemployment.
Thank you, merci Antonio. Thank you, Antonio. Merci à tous les orateurs.
I would like to thank all the speakers for contributing to this debate.
Connected to the resolution United for Jobs, and looking to the priorities that you have mentioned, everything is in that resolution. The question of investment, stop austerity, the alternative, respect of the choice of the people, fighting social dumping, fighting unemployment, job creation, giving another visage of Europe. This is all what is in this resolution. So I would now formally ask to the delegate to vote in favor of that resolution. Do you vote? Who is in favor of the resolution United for Jobs? Thank you. I would go abstention, to do it very formal. Against? Unanimity. Thank you very much. And we'll continue with the program now. The next panel will be on the roadmap 2019. Thank you very much. Thank you.